Now I want to talk about constructors and destructors for classes. Now, what both of these are items that you could have that are for your class that help do the setup and takedown of your class when you need it and when you don't need it anymore. So constructor is it initializes all the variables and anything that you need when you create that class. So generally speaking, there is no return type. The name matches the class name, and usually you're setting you could easily overload it the same as you did any other function, and you usually have some way to have things have default values or initialized values because, right, number one rule of programming, always initialize your variables. And destructors, they're similar. They also don't have a return type. They also are with the same name as your class, but they have the tilde in front of them. And basically, what it does is when your program determines that you don't need that class anymore, it goes and runs the destructor to destroy that item. So if we go back to our example, we are making the items class. And so if you're going to make a constructor, it would be items, and you'd have your curly braces. And what we're going to do is we're going to set this up like you should in things. So we're doing prototypes of them right now. So we'd want one with no parameters being passed in. And then we want also one with having the different variables that we're going to be passing in. So we have standard string, a float, and an int. And you notice I didn't put variable names. You could put variable names here, but you don't have to have variable names in the prototypes. And then we also want our destructor, which is going to be a tilde and items. And again, you're not going to have any parameters for your destructor. There should only be one, and it gets called when the thing's finished. And so now we're going to copy these. This is what I like to do just because it makes my life easier so I don't have typos. And then I'm going to go into my implementation file for my class, and we're going to paste these. And so you'll see it's not happy, right? But because we need to do a little bit more work for them, we're going to first we have to tell it where the item came from. And just like we've used this here before where we have the standard : that's saying that this string is from the standard library. We now need to tell it where to find items, and items comes from our items library, and that is the class that it is. So we're going to have items : and that tells the system that we have that. It's still not happy, and that's because we have the semicolon, and what we need instead of a semicolon, we need the curly braces to tell it that we're actually defining that, right? Here, we just made the prototypes in the header file, and in the implementation file is where we're actually going to put the definition of what the function's actually going to do. So that's why it needs the curly braces. So again, we'll do that for each one. So items : and then we'll change the semicolon to curly braces, and we could do that for both of them. Now this one looks a little weird because we have the tilde in between, but it's still set up the same way. So that's how we're going to set up these by default. And so with these, we would just have the variables that we had in our class. So we have our name, right? And we could just set that to nothing, right? So that we're just initializing the variables. This is if there's no defaults, we'll just have default things. So the weight is going to be 0.0, and the count is going to be 0, right? So that just kind of sets the defaults to them so that we don't have to worry about that. Now in the one where we actually we're having an overloaded constructor, right, with the variables that we're actually passing in. This, we're going to give it the values of, we need a variable names now, right? So weight and count. And so I'm just going to set name equal to N, weight equal to W, and count equal to C. In a subsequent video, I'm going to tell you about the this parameter, but we'll talk about that in a later video. And then in the destructor, all I'm going to do in the destructor right now is just going to be, I'm just going to do a standard cout and in the destructor for, and then we'll put name, just so that we can see that it happens. And so we'll go back to our main, and we've created this one where we set the variable, right? And then we'll create another one, items and new item. And I'm going to just give it some things. So we'll put shoes, and we'll say they weigh 1 pound, 5, and they are, and we only have one pair, right? And just so that we can see that we have these, and we're not going to print them or anything, but what we should see when we compile this, right? See if it compiles, and look at that, it compiled fine, and we execute it, and you're going to see that it just printed out this line, right? That was nothing, but then it went in and printed the destructor for shoes and the destructor for cloak, right? So it made both of these things, and it was happy, and it printed out just those. So if we wanted to, we could come in here and we could actually print out that it's in here. Standard cout, created blank item. And then this one is standard cout, created item with N. And so we could just see, right, that this one's creating a blank one, and then this one's creating that, so we could see how things go. And so we compile, and we run it. And so you can see, right, if we look at their main, that it did here, it created that item. It didn't set it to cloak yet, that's why it was blank, right? And then we came over here and we did, created the shoes. And so it said it created the shoes. Then we printed out the hello world, and then it did the destructors. So that's in essence the constructor and the destructors for classes.